give Andy a warm welcome.
Hi. So I'm going to talk to you tonight about the shit nightclub anti-pattern. So imagine a group of you go to a fancy-looking nightclub in London. It's in Leicester Square. That must be good. And you can hear the thumping music from inside the nightclub. And that thumping music, it sort of carries with it on the evening air the sort of magical lure and promise of good times. So you think, yeah, let's do it. So you pay the £30 entrance fee, and the suited bouncers let you in. And as you go inside and as you descend the stairs through the sort of fog of, neon dry ice, this is the sort of thing you imagine awaits you on the night ahead. But when you actually get inside, it's a little bit different. So, as the minutes and the hours sort of slip by, you're sort of looking at each other, and one of them turns to you and says, "Should we leave?" And everyone says, "Leave? We all paid £30 to get in here. I'm not leaving. God, I'll just stick it out a bit longer. It'll fill up soon, right? It'll be fine." And anyway, as you probably gathered, this whole sort of elaborate analogy is something that I think happens a lot with software delivery. And I think there's loads and loads of examples of it. I'm just going to give you 3 examples, starting with this. So large, complex projects spanning a number of months and with a big bang delivery, so only delivering value at the end of the project. So I'm going to talk you through how this might pan out in a fairly typical, not particularly agile company. So it all starts off with an estimate. Somebody says, we want to do this thing, and I think it's about 3 months. And the senior stakeholders say, yeah, 3 months, that sounds good. Yeah, let's do it. So they engage a team, and the team come along and they break down the work, and they look at all the individual pieces of work, and they estimate them all, and then they add up the estimates, and then they come up with 6 months. And I think it's probably always true that if you take a piece of work and you break it down and you add up the estimates, you will end up with a bigger number. And for large projects, that's usually a more realistic number as well. Unfortunately, the senior stakeholders, they kind of like that 3 months number. They were quite keen on that number. So some conversations take place, and these, a few things get de-scoped. Maybe some of the estimates get squeezed a little bit. You're going to talk to the engineers. Are you sure about this estimate here? Are you sure about that? And any engineers, are there any engineers in the room? Software developers? Yeah. So I don't know if you've ever, put your hand up if you've ever been asked to squeeze your estimates. Yeah, it's really hard to justify your estimates, isn't it? Because estimates are based on experience and gut feel. And when you ask to justify it and someone says, it's not that long, is it really? It's not really that long, is it? Are you sure it's that long? You do sort of find yourself meeting them somewhere, well, I was going to say in the middle, but actually. So we end up back at the 3 months estimate anyway. And the stakeholders, they're really happy with that. That's great. So the project begins. It all starts off well. But pretty early in this project, you can start to see that things aren't going so well. If I was looking at that, I think I would pretty much call straight away that 3 months is not going to happen. Unfortunately, in this company, the project manager decides he's not going to tell anyone about this just yet, because, the stakeholders, they're not going to be happy about this, and there was that whole 6-month thing. And, mainly, it's early on in the project. We'll probably pull it in, won't we? It'll be fine. Unfortunately, and rather predictably, things don't quite pan out the way he'd hoped. So he says to the team, I'm going to go and ask for more time. So here he is, asking for more time. And the way that conversation goes with the stakeholders is a little bit of bartering goes on. And what he ends up agreeing to is 1 more month. He says, definitely 1 more month and we'll have this project nailed. Definitely 1 more month. So 2 months later, and it's not done. And there's a groaning backlog of work. There's so much work still to do. And one of the things, incidentally, on that backlog is performance testing. Everybody agrees we really should get around to that performance testing. I'll crack on with that. The team are feeling pretty miserable by this point. It was only, by the way, after I'd drawn this picture, I realised what a weird likeness it was to me. But anyway. And the project manager is secretly quite angry with the team. Has anyone got any ideas what this project manager might be thinking right now? Why can't they work weekends? Yeah, they've already been doing that. That's not a new idea, don't worry. He's thinking to himself, why is it taking so long? And why is it always like this? And the stakeholders, well, they're pretty annoyed as well. They're really cross with the team because they've invested, money and reputation in this project. And they think to themselves, well, these engineers are just not up to the job. So, some more engineers are dragged in, possibly literally. And the team, of course, they're all thinking about leaving. Or talking about leaving the company, except for the guy who's not very good. 6 months in, and they finally get around to that performance testing. And it turns out they haven't quite hit the targets that they were hoping for. So at this point, drastic action happens. So they say, right, we're going to parachute in some whizzo super tech guy who comes and sorts out projects that are failing. This might be a highly paid contractor, or it might be someone internal, but whoever it is, parachute them in. And then they get a new and better project manager. This guy's going to sort it out. We scapegoat that guy, get rid of him. And they basically just chuck a load of money at the problem. Because basically, they can't fail now, right? We're 6 months into this project. We haven't delivered any value to the customer. We can't fail now. It'll be a complete waste of time and money. And more importantly, more important than any of that, if it stops now, the stakeholders will look like fools. So, eventually, at about 9 months, they manage to ship something. Now, it's not very good. It doesn't perform very well. It takes 20 seconds to load a page, but, And it's riddled with bugs. And it's a nightmare to support operationally. And what do the stakeholders think? They think what we need is more rigid and formal processes to stop this happening again. So that is the first example, the Big Bang project. And big complex projects always take, at least 3 times longer to deliver than anybody thought they would, right? This happens time and time again. And even when you can see at the start of the project that things are going to go wrong, even when it's clear that you're on the wrong track and you're going about it the wrong way, they sort of soldier on anyway at this sort of horrendous financial and personal cost. The impact on team morale. And of course, when we say impact on morale, that's really just a euphemism for the impact on people's lives. Yeah, because the misery doesn't just stay within those 4 walls of the office. These people have families. Yeah, we have a responsibility to not make people miserable. So example 2, the sales pitch. Now, we've all seen this one, haven't we? So it's hard for these people to get their projects through. The development team, God, you haven't even finished the last project, and we want to do all this stuff. But luckily, there's always some third party who will come in and they'll give you a sales pitch. We can sell you this system, and it'll add so much value to your company. And here's the beautiful thing about it. It requires almost no effort from you guys to integrate this system. Easy. Of course, the reality is that it wasn't quite so easy to integrate, right? And not only have we paid the cost, the initial cost of integrating it, and it's taken our developers ages to actually get to the point of having it even working. Not only that, not only are we paying this company loads of money every month, but also we have the operational overhead now and the technical debt that this has incurred. Third example, sometimes this kind of nightmare is actually inflicted on the company from within. Sometimes you get some sort of senior tech person who is very fond of gold plating, hasn't really heard of MVP or Yagni, and I think we can build this amazing thing. And you're kind of forced into buying into this vision and delivering this monstrosity, and then operationally supporting it. And I can absolutely guarantee that this tech person here is not involved in operational support. So, that's just 3 examples, and there's loads more examples of the shit nightclub in software delivery. So I suppose the question is, when we are in a shit nightclub, why do we want to stay so much? So we talked about the £30 entrance fee, so that's one thing. But there's some other reasons as well. So one of them is reputation. Somebody has made promises. They've gone to the board and said, we can do this thing. It's going to be fantastic. And the money that they think it's going to make, they factored it into their budgets. So now their credibility and their reputation are on the line. Self-delusion. So I think that sometimes having made these promises and having convinced so many people that we should do this thing, you sort of convince yourself as well that it's a fantastic thing. And you become so fixed on the idea that this project we're going to do is going to be amazing, and it's going to go really smoothly, and it's going to deliver us loads of money. That you believe it so strongly that it's really hard to let go of that belief. And I think we're all susceptible to this. We all do this, just in our day-to-day lives. We've all had things that we believe. And even when the evidence is right there staring us in the face, that actually maybe it's not such a great thing, we sort of cling on to this belief as long as we possibly can. So recently at Sky Bet, I designed an architecture for a system that looked something like this. And I put quite a lot of thought into how this would work. I'd gone around, I'd talked to a lot of people about the problems that we needed to solve, and I've made sure we solved every single one of those problems with this architecture. And then one of the engineers came over to me and suggested a small tweak. Now, my initial reaction to this was irritation, because I had put a lot of thought and effort and time into this architecture. So I immediately started to come up with reasons why this will not work. But actually, the more we talked, the more I started to remember XP. I don't mean the operating system, by the way. So that extreme programming thing that Kent Beck said about deliver the simplest thing that could possibly work. And so instead of thinking about all the reasons why this wouldn't work, I started to think about all the reasons why maybe it could work. And that's what we delivered. And I tell you, the operational support of this system versus the system I designed is a hell of a lot better. Self-delusion is a thing that, as I said, we're all susceptible to. And we do it in our day-to-day lives all the time. When you're having an argument with your partner, it's maybe only later that you sort of think to yourself, actually, yeah, maybe I was being an arsehole, actually. That's a good point. And look at bad drivers on the roads. Those people really believe they're amazing drivers. Despite all the evidence to the contrary, people hammering on their horns, swearing at them, the white knuckles of their passengers. You know, it doesn't matter how much evidence mounts up. They genuinely believe that all the problems are caused by the idiocy of the other drivers on the roads. Blind optimism. You know, having invested so much in a thing, it's really hard to think, actually, that was just a waste of time and we need to just rethink the whole thing. It's much easier to think to yourself, you know, it might just work out. It might just happen. It's easy to sort of just forget about that inconvenient evidence and just think to yourself, no, you know what? I think this shit nightclub, give it an hour, it's going to be a throbbing hub of hedonistic happiness. But, you know, to quote that Rudy Giuliani quote, hope is not a strategy. And then finally, fear. So all organisations have ingrained in their culture, particularly as they get bigger, a fear of change. Change is expensive, it's risky, it's a lot of upheaval. And I think that this sort of hurts us in two ways. One of them is that to bring about a change in an organisation, particularly a large organisation, you have to convince a lot of people that this change is a good thing to do. You have to build up a certain momentum, and that means that once you've started going in the wrong direction, it's really hard to steer back into the right direction. A sort of maniacal doggedness kicks in. People just, including the engineers, everybody just wants to finish the thing you've started. It's just, it's only natural, right? And at some point early on in the project, somebody had to go around and talk to all those people and convince them that this was a good thing to do. And when you're talking to senior management, you have to come up with a very compelling reason why this thing is the thing we should do, and not all those other hundreds of things. And so as a result, you find yourself exaggerating a bit. You find yourself making ever more outlandish claims about what this thing is going to deliver. It's not just going to make loads of money, it's going to be a future enabler. In future, once we have this system, our teams will be able to deliver value in a fraction of the time. It's going to be so easy. And it is going to make a lot of money. This thing is going to make, we've calculated it, it's going to generate £7.6 million in revenue a year. That's nearly £8 million a year. That's basically £10 million a year, which is nearly £1 million a month. £1 million a month in profit. And of course, it's a future enabler. So that's just the start. So it'd be millions of pounds a month in profit. And of course, all the buzzwords come out as well, don't they? It's not just a future enabler. This is going to be game-changing. This is going to be industry-leading. It's going to be world-class. It's going to be next-generation technology. It's going to be cutting-edge. It's going to be bleeding-edge. It's going to be the suppurating wound of technology. But in reality, we delivered a shit nightclub. So, given that it's so hard to tell when you're in a shit nightclub sometimes, because we've got those blinkers on, because we're so optimistic, because we're a little bit self-deluded, and because we have a kind of reputational stake, what are the sort of telltale signs? What's the sort of evidence? Apart from the big graph, apart from the big burn down, if you don't have one of those, what's the evidence that tells you you're in a shit nightclub? So here's some things to look out for. Some questions to ask yourself, I guess. One of them is this project deadline-driven or is it value-driven? Are people talking about, are we hitting the dates? Or are people talking about what value have we delivered so far? And what's the next thing we're going to do? Is that going to add value or not? Have we validated that we're adding value? Is this project led by managers or is it led by the team? Is it managers telling the team to do this stuff? Or is it the team who understand the domain and the detail that they're working with? Is it them that's leading it? This one might sound a bit daft, but is there a relaxed atmosphere? It's kind of obvious, right? Like we all know we want to work somewhere where it's not stressful and people are, hammering away at their keyboards and not talking to each other. But actually it's really important, isn't it, that people are talking to each other. And if you can see a project happening where no one's talking to each other, you know there's a problem. Do people have time to think? Because software engineering, all of the people involved in software engineering are thinkers. We hired them because they are experienced, highly qualified people who are good at thinking. And then, sometimes, companies throw them into an environment where they don't have time to think. And if they see somebody sat there thinking, like if you see that person at their desk going, for more than, okay, we'll allow them a couple of minutes, we think, God, we need to get rid of that person. They're not delivering any value. And finally, and this is probably the key one, Are we delivering value incrementally? Are we validating that we're doing the right thing as we go along? I think I've talked before about the sat-nav analogy. Are we just sort of blindly following the route? Or do we have a sat-nav with us? And are we checking the sat-nav as we go along, saying, actually, you know what, we probably want to take a slightly different route here or do a slightly different thing? So, to conclude, this is what I would say to people who are in a shit nightclub. It's very simple. You've got two choices, right? Number one is you stay in the shit nightclub. In which case, you spent a load of money, and it is a certainty that you will have a shit night. Or number two, you could leave the nightclub, in which case, yes, you will have spent a load of money, but you might just end up having a good night. That's it. Thank you very much.